Hello everyone, my name is Bazola and I'm one of the co-founders of SuperX, and this is lesson 6 of the Mastering Crypto Copy Trading course with SuperX on Hyperliquid. So in this lesson, it's all about finding profitable wallets to copy trade, totally explained. And so this will be a very practical lesson where we'll walk through some live filtering examples. We'll walk through some live examples of good wallets, just so you get a good sense of what it's like to look at a good wallet. And you'll also start to see examples of key tips that I recommend, as well as some good habits and practices to keep in mind when trying to find good wallets to copy trade. So let's get started. So for the purposes of beginners who are new to copy trading, there are generally 4 types of copy trades that I generally recommend for beginners. So the first is low margin scalp wallets, high margin scalp wallets, low margin swing wallets, and then lastly high margin swing wallets. And so let's look at some quick examples right now on SuperX. And so before we explained what a scalper is and what a swing trader is, just to refresh your memory. So a scalper would be traders who go for small returns in the difference in the change in price, and they trade very frequently. And so this wallet, which happens to actually be a vault on Hyperliquid, is what we would class as a low margin scalper. So why? Why is that? So they would be a scalper because they enter a lot of trades. So in this case, as you can see, over the past few days in July, they've entered several trades. And so that's why they'll be classified as a scalper. And the reason why they'll be low margin is because they tend to use a low percentage of their margin for each trade. And so that's kind of the telltale signs of a low margin but scalper in this case. And you can see some ancillary information. For example, the TVL, in this case, because it's a vault, this would be classified as the perp balance, as well as the minimum balance copy trade. But of course, remember, the minimum balance is a guide, so you don't have to, it's not a hard and fast rule. But in this case, considering that, the duration that the wallet holds isn't too crazy, it is still possible to copy trade if you want to, probably in this case manually. As you can see, the vault tends to be quite consistent in the leverage that they use. And so you are still able to kind of copy trade this wallet, although it would be likely to be more manual in this case. And so now that you have a good idea of, hey, a low margin scalp wallet and how successful they can be, particularly if you look at the perp P&L, that gives us somewhat of an indication of the type of wallets you might want to go for. Now, we generally only suggest following scalp wallets, particularly low margin ones, if you have the balance really to enable such small trades, number one. But number two, ideally the target wallet, the one you're copying, the P&L, the percentage return that they see, is high enough such that your returns aren't being eaten away by fees. We'll go into a bit more detail about this in the common mistakes to avoid, but we generally suggest only really following low margin scalp wallets if they have the P&L such that if they go for enough of a P&L such that when you copy them, you also profit and your returns won't be eaten away by fees. So the next type of wallets that you might want to be looking for when copy trading, in this case, would be high margin scalpers. So very similar to the low margin scalpers, these guys, they trade quite frequently. And again, they don't tend to hold their positions for an overly long period of time. And so you'll see, particularly the margin usage, it's a lot higher. So you're looking in the realm of 60% to 30%, or even 58%, or in this case 93%. And so you want to just keep this in mind when you are looking for these types of wallets, right? And so the question becomes, if you are kind of inclined towards a scalper, you might want to figure out, hey, do I want to find a low margin scalper or a high margin scalper? In this case, if your wallet balance isn't as high, you might want to lean towards a high margin scalper, because as you can see, about $2,000 is a more suitable kind of balance to copy trade with. The other type of wallets that you might want to be on the lookout for would be kind of low margin swing traders. Kind of to refresh your memory, swing traders, again, they don't tend to trade as frequently. As you can see, even though some trades did come in yesterday on July 12th, you're seeing only about two, 3 trades so far this month. So they aren't very frequent, and these guys tend to really want to ride the price more when it comes to kind of changes in the market. And so they want to hold for a longer period of time. And so you're seeing hold periods of 3 days, 2 days, or even 5 days. Of course, they might hold some positions for a longer period of time, but that tends to be on the rare side. And so we generally recommend people who, perhaps they have a larger balance, or they're a bit more on the patient side. They don't want to trade too frequently, to probably go for low margin swing type traders. And the whole idea really is to introduce you to some archetypes of traders, just so you can be on the lookout for them, essentially. And the last type of trading style I want to make you guys aware of would be, of course, the high margin swing traders. I would say high margin swing traders tend to be on the riskier side, because, of course, when they bet on the correct direction of the market, they can be really correct. But of course, if they bet wrong, that can also be quite painful too. So as you can see, quite consistent with a swing trader. They don't trade too frequently. As you can see, the last position was July 10th and July 24th. With a decent percentage of the margin used, and the duration, of course, being about 4 days, 20 days in this case. And so that's kind of the key, the different 4 archetypes that you want to keep an eye on for. And so just so you have an idea now of the 4 archetypes, you can start to figure out, okay, how do I want to start filtering in order to actually find these traders, which we'll look at now. So we head back to our slides. Just to do a quick recap. If you're new to copy trading, we generally suggest looking for 4 archetypes of traders. That would be the low margin scalpers, the high margin scalpers, the low margin swingers, and then lastly, the high margin swingers. The question then becomes, great, now that I know the types of traders I want to be looking for, and particularly the performance, I'll go into more detail about trying to find good traders that perform well in a second. What are the key filters I want to be using for that? And so let's go to the next section. So there are really 6 key filters that I would suggest when looking for successful copy traders. So the first, the most important, in my opinion, is the max drawdown. Again, to give you a quick recap of what that means, this is the largest percentage drop in the account balance over the specified period of time. So for example, say over the course of a week, if my account balance goes from $100,000 to $50,000, that represents a max drawdown of 50%. And so that's quite high. I believe the next key filter then is the return on equity, the ROE. You don't have the wallet age. And the reason why you want to have, and really the higher the wallet age, the better, because if you do find a trader that is able to have a low max drawdown, a high ROE over a long period of time, that's a really good sign that they're a consistent trader. It's a good sign that they aren't just getting lucky. And so you want to look at wallet age when you're using the filtering to find some of these successful traders that you can clearly see here. The next key thing you want to look at is the win rate. Now, the win rate isn't necessarily the end all and be all. I would say that the win rate only really applies if, depending on the style of trader that you're looking for. If you're looking for a scalper, this is someone that is taking lots of different trades and they're really shooting for a small percent return. They have to have a high win rate because if they have a couple of bad trades, that could wipe out all their scalping profits. And so ideally, you really want to be going after scalpers that know what they're doing and they have a high win rate. But if you're going after swing traders, their win rate can be lower because these types of traders, they're really riding a trend as much as possible. They're looking to capture as much of the return as possible, such that they don't have to be right all the time. They can be right three or 2 out of 3 times and still have great returns when it comes to the return on equity, just because they were able to they were right 2 out of 3 times. And so that's just something to be aware of when looking at some of these metrics. Depending on the type of trader you're looking for, the win rate might be more or less applicable. If you want some help trying to figure out or trying to get at these types of traders, i.e. a scalper or a swing trader, you can use the average hold time filter to try and help. Of course, the idea being that scalpers tend to have a lower average hold time and swing traders tend to have a higher average hold time. And then lastly, of course, is the minimum balance copy trade. This is, of course, if you're choosing, not to choosing to copy trade, as opposed to say tracking a wallet initially, then you want to make sure that you are using that filter just so you aren't wasting your time finding traders that actually don't fit your, your price range, as it were. But I wouldn't necessarily, be overly fixated on that filter, because what we've seen from a lot of users is, they might be flexible with the minimum balance to copy trade. They might have a tiny bit less, but they might increase the copy size just so they're able to see more transaction execute. But of course, that does come with increased risk. And so you want to make sure you know what you're doing if that's kind of the strategy you're pursuing. Or you're actually just in the research stage and you're happy to filter for wallets that are perhaps on the higher side, with the idea being that you'll deposit additional funds later on, as long as, of course, you're able to find the wallets that you like. So now that we have seen the ideas of what a good filter does, let's actually do it live. So in this case, just to really reiterate what good filtering looks like, what a good wallet looks like, let's look at the examples that we found. So looking at this, we have the ROE on all, and that's about 50%. The profit factor is about 20. The max drawdown is very low at 2% or roughly 3%. The win rate is about 100%. And these are some of the hallmarks, right, of a good trader, and as such, something that you might want to actually start filtering for. And so when I head into, SuperX, this is the main view that you see when you first hit the page. You want to make sure that you're in the All tab. Remember, this shows the list of every single trader in the SuperX database, and as such, you also have available to you every single filter in this case. Remembering what the key filters are for: max drawdown, ROE, wallet age, win rate, average hold time, and minimum balance to copy trade. And remembering what good metrics look like for a wallet, about 3%, 50% for ROE, 100% for win rate in this case, and what have you. You can start beginning to filter for those. Now, you can be totally flexible in this. You don't have to, follow this to a T, but just so you have a bit of an idea of kind of what you want to start filtering for when using SuperX. So for me personally, again, I'm definitely going to filter for the 90-day ROE. In the previous example, it was about 50, but I'm happy to be a bit more loose. So I can say that the wallets that I want to see in my dashboard need to have a minimum ROE for 90 days of 30%. I'll go ahead and apply. As you can see, the number of traders does reduce the more filters you apply. Next, I want my max drawdown to be low. In the other wallet that I showed you, I think the lowest was about 2.7%. But again, I'm a bit more relaxed, so I'm happy to have the maximum drawdown. So this is the highest the max drawdown can ever be, is 10%. In this case, again, you can have a more loose max drawdown if you have a higher risk tolerance. In this case, perhaps you want to be, 40%. But again, I genuinely recommend setting this to be low, just so you're minimizing your risk as much as possible. So in my case, I'm happy to do 10%. You then want to look at the win rate. And so because I'm looking for a scalper, I'm happy to have my minimum win rate be 80%. And so what this means is the table will only show me traders that have a win rate of 80% and above. Happy to go ahead and press apply. And next, I can look at the minimum balance to copy trade. And so this is where, I might want to find wallets that make sense for my balance that I have. So I have about $700 in my account. So I'm happy to type in the maximum of 700. So this means that I won't see any wallets that are above 700. But again, you can be more flexible with your approach. If you know you want to deposit later on, but you're just curious if you can find a really good wallet, that you might actually be something about 4,000. Whoops. Then you might be happy to actually look at a minimum balance of $4,000. It really just depends on your style, and that's why you don't want to be too constricted when filtering, because you might find a great wallet that is actually above that. So we'd always recommend flexibility when it comes to this filter. So I'm happy to go ahead and apply there. So looking at this, I'm pretty happy with the wallets that I've selected, and I'm happy to actually go ahead and start looking for a couple. Again, even though I do mention there are additional filters that you can use, for example, the wallet age and the average hold time. Again, I like to be a bit more loose with my filtering, just so I can see as many as possible, but of course are decent enough so I'm not wasting my time. And that's why I'm happy to not actually filter right now for those traders. But again, if you prefer to, you can. So with those filters now done, I can look through the list of the ones that I might like. When doing this, I tend to look at the 7-day P&L just to get an idea of the size of the wallet and if it kind of matches what I'm a bit interested in looking at return wise. And so it also gives a hint of activity as well. So it looks like this guy, his 7-day P&L is about 0. I tend to avoid the zeros and gravitate towards the ones that are, that actually have a value that indicates that they're active. And so that's kind of one heuristic you want to look at. Again, you can kind of scroll to the far right and look at a bunch of details. I tend to do this less because, frankly speaking, and we'll kind of touch upon this in a second when we look at the key tips for copy trading, is I tend to look through all of them because 16 isn't too much. And what I'll do is I'll add them to my watch list just so I can save them and carry on doing research. But when it comes to copy trading successfully, it really does require persistence. It requires patience. It requires you to find high quality wallets. Because again, this is alpha, this is edge, and so it's not necessarily going to be given up to you like that. And so I have to kind of click into this wallet and see what it looks like, just to get an idea of it. So one of the key things when you kind of find a wallet that you like the look of is the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you look at every single filter, and so. You might look at it across different time frames, but at some point you want to get to all. Look at the drawdown across different time frames, and again you want to get to all. And you kind of rinse and repeat this for the different filter settings, because this is one of the common mistakes that we see is people not actually just doing research in the wallet. They're not getting an idea of, hey, is this trader, is he being good over the long term? And so you also want to look at the per P&L over time, and then you probably want to give a cursory look to the P&L, kind of the recent transaction history. And kind of quite common for a scalper, like I mentioned, you're seeing a lot of trades, you're seeing the trades being quite short, but what you are seeing is remarkable consistency. And so in this live filtering, we may have found a wallet that's really that might be quite good to copy trade. Plus, they fit in within my balance, and so this is really interesting. And so, at the very least, I'm going to keep doing further research on this wallet because very, 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 it looks good so far, and the margin usage isn't too crazy. Again, if you're seeing wallets that have insanely high margin usage, that could be quite risky. Also, and so this looks amazing, great wallet. Let's keep looking at the styles as well. They have one open position, which is a Bitcoin long. That's okay. They have a bunch of open orders, which kind of gives you an idea of where they're trading at and what they're looking at doing. But nothing too crazy. And the last thing you want to make sure you look at, and this is a really important tip, is you want to look at the perp balance as well. how has the perp balance changed over time? And so the two key things you want to look at here would be the deposit withdrawals combined with the perp balance in the table across all. So we can see that this trader hasn't really made any deposits or any withdrawals for a while. The last one was May 26th, which means that it looks like their balance is, at least from May onwards, their balance changes has been purely from trading, which is a really good sign. And so it looks like from May 29th, their balance was about 36,000. And at the moment, it is now about 42,000. And that's really what you want to see, because what that means is this trader has been able to grow their balance, right, without any external deposits. And of course, you can get a sense of this by looking at the P&L over time, right? But again, the perp balance just really adds context and really solidifies the potential of the wallet over time as well. And so I definitely recommend looking at the perp balance over time also. So now that we have a good idea, or now that we've actually gone through a live filtering, I do have some top tips for copy trading to be aware of when using SuperX on Hyperliquid. So we can go into that now. And of course, I've alluded to a couple of these before, but the absolute number one tip when it comes to copy trading is you want to minimize risk up front. So even though SuperX offers a bunch of risk management tools that we talked about in a couple of videos ago, for example, max margin, total max margin, stop losses, take profit targets, the best way of, but however, those are risk management tools when the copy trade is active, when you're actually in a trade. And even though those are great, another best practice is to minimize risk upfront before you actually start copying the trader. And some of the key things that I would suggest in order to do that is absolutely the max drawdown. You need to be making sure that the max drawdown of the wallets you copy is not high. And that is the number one tip that I can give when it comes to minimizing risk. If you're copy trading traders that have, max drawdowns of 60, of 70%, that's not great. And you might have a bad experience, because when you have a max drawdown that is that high, it is very likely at some point you will experience that in a copy trade. So what I mean by that is, if you copy trade someone, but the total margin you've used towards the trade is, say, for example, $1,000, you might experience your account value dropping by 50% to $500. And so the best way of preventing that or mitigating that risk is by only following people that have low max drawdowns. The second key tip in order to minimize risk upfront is you need to be looking at all the performance metrics. We did this briefly just now, where we clicked all for every single performance metrics, like the profit factor, like the max drawdown, like the ROE, and what have you. We did the analysis on the perp P&L, we did the analysis on the perp balance, and we even looked at the deposit and withdrawals as well. This is some of the things that you have to be doing when it comes to analyzing wallets. You have to look at all the performance metrics and make sure it makes sense. And you're happy to use, I would welcome using some of the heuristics that I suggested in this video, just so you're getting a good idea of how that works. The second key recommendation is analyzing the margin usage. So I believe that we have a good example of what is a bad wallet or a bad trader to try and avoid when copy trading. And so when you look at this trader, they have a very high max drawdown. So it looks like they lost all their money, or a good chunk of their money in that case anyway. On the 90-day, that's very high, 60%. The ROE is negative as well, again, 88%. But also, kind of what speaking to the other tip regarding is the max margin used. So what this means is this trader is using 90% of their perp equity in a single trade. And that's very risky because it increases the risk of liquidation and essentially losing your entire balance. And so you want to make sure that you're copying traders where their max margin usage isn't too high per trade. And you're seeing a pretty high usage from trade to trade for this bad trader. Whereas, if we go to this trader, it's kind of 0.02%, but to be fair, it is a vault. But, this one's a bit more reasonable. You're seeing 7% on the trades that make sense. You're actually seeing very high margin usage where there's P&L loss here as well. Yeah, and you're seeing quite sensible margin usage for this trader. I believe we call them a low margin swing. There we go, 4%, 5%, 5%, 5%. This is very sensible, very reasonable, and would be a very good example of a trader that is managing margin well. Now, it doesn't have to be this low. You can go as high as 30%, 40%. It depends on your risk tolerance, but generally speaking, you don't want to be copy trading traders that have an excessively high margin usage. That's a recipe for disaster. The next is recency bias. And so this is where the wallet age really matters. And funnily enough, in the wallet that we did find that looks interesting, it's only about 2 months old. And so that kind of tells us that, that might be, a point of caution. Because with recency bias, even though the performance of the trader looks great now, that could change at any time. It could change, if the market changes suddenly and the trader isn't as comfortable in that environment. And as a result of that, they aren't performing as well. And so to fight against recency bias, you ideally want to be copy trading wallets and traders that have, they've been around for a while. So if we look at this individual, their perp P&L has been consistently going up since, August of last year, which is great. You want to see that. Very long time period. The same for this trader as well. 6 months. They did have some down days, but overall you can tell that over the longer period of time, they've been able to be quite consistent in their performance. And so the only way to fight recency bias, it really is to focus on wallets that have been around for longer. That's really the best recommendation I can give on that front. And the last key tip is patience and persistence. Again, you have to remember, SuperX indexes all the traders, or the most relevant traders on Hyperliquid, which enables a really interesting opportunity for copy trading. But, and what that does is it creates edge. It creates the opportunity of being extremely profitable if you are able to be patient and persistent in combing through data and finding great traders. I would always recommend that it's very unrealistic to expect, the first wallet or trader you come across is going to make you the returns that you want to see. That might not be the case. You might get lucky, but it might not be the case. And as such, copy trading requires patience. It requires persistence. It requires practicing proper risk management. And as a result of that, would always suggest keeping those two key traits in mind when getting started on your copy trading journey. And I think that's something that people tend to forget. It's more psychological, it's less practical, but arguably, in my honest opinion, it's just as important. If you want to be successful copy trading, you have to be patient and you have to be persistent. And, this would be a really good example of a wallet that it looks good, it looks promising. I might actually just decide to track him for now. I might not even copy trade immediately. But like I mentioned before, I do have, an even longer list of wallets that I might want to keep, sifting through. And so with those filters that I had previously, I do have 16 traders. And because, I do see a lot of edge with SuperX, with Hyperliquid, I'm happy to go through all 16. I'm happy to save them to my watch list. I'm happy to track them. When I feel confident that I found a winner, I'm then happy to initiate a copy trade and start hopefully generating some returns. And that's the sort of patience and that's the sort of persistence that we find creates the most successful users of SuperX. And I would always recommend for traders who are just getting started as well. And so that wraps up I believe the 6th lesson in SuperX today when it comes to finding profitable wallets to copy trade. I hope you found that helpful. And in the next video, we'll actually start looking at some common mistakes to avoid to really, tie the bow on all of this that you want to make sure you're avoiding when copy trading. Thanks a lot. I'll see you on the next one.